What's going on? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to this channel, we talk about mental health through pop culture. And if you guys have been living in America for the last 20 years, there's nothing more pop culture than Fast and Furious. My name's Captain Nostalgia, and today we're revving up to talk about Fast X. So the movie actually feels like more of a sequel to Fast 5 than it does the actual F9, whatever you want to call it. Fast X picks up 10 years after the events of Fast 5, where the villain from that film, Hernan Reyes' son, played by Jason Momoa, comes back to exact revenge and to tear the family apart. Maybe I should have worn my Tommy Wiseau t-shirt for this review. By 10 movies in, typically the rules of the franchise of where we began with the first installment have completely changed, and the Fast and Furious is no different. And if you guys are expecting a more grounded approach to this one, let me just tell you that the signature absurdity that you guys have come to know, love, possibly even hate, remain intact. I will say this film is definitely a lot more grounded in terms of some of the more recent entries like Fate of the Furious and F9. And it kind of gets back to a little bit of the heart of this franchise with the street racing. And I think that's what makes Fast X one of the best installments that we've gotten, probably since Fast 5. Not to say that this movie isn't a bit of a mess. A couple years ago when we did the podcast episode of Halloween Kills, we talked about how the film really felt like it was the middle chapter in a trilogy, and that's how Fast X feels. The way that the narrative sets everything up, you feel like you are getting the very just foundation for what it could be either a 2 or 3 part ending finale to this franchise, depending on the sources that you are reading. This is kind of where I have a love-hate relationship with this movie. I love that they have a clear direction of where they want to take these characters, how they want this grand finale to end, and having Jason Momoa, who I'll get to in a second, at the center of that is just a really great storytelling, and I had a lot of fun with it. But in terms of a standalone film, this movie is, first off, made for those of us that love this franchise or at least have kept up with it. This is not a good entry point whatsoever. There are too many history moments, great callbacks in this. But I want to emphasize that because this movie as a standalone film just feels messy. Early on in the movie, the family kind of gets separated and they kind of just stay separated. So Letty has her own arc, Dom has his own arc. You have Ludacris, Tyrese, and their clique that kind of have their own arc. You have John Cena having his own arc. And so we're constantly jumping from one story to one story to one story to where this film feels more like the ending to like something that you would find on Stranger Things rather than actually feeling cinematic. And again, that's not a knock at the quality. It's just this movie feels very busy. It's very messy. But again, I understand it from a storytelling standpoint that this is a movie that you are telling as a larger narrative and not necessarily a standalone film. And that's kind of the problem sometimes when you take that Deathly Hallows or Hunger Games approach. Storytelling is that you are kind of like, you're making box office money, but in terms of you're sacrificing the profit for the story. And this movie, let me just say that this movie, there are definite times in this movie, like going back to the absurdity, this is honestly some of the worst dialogue that I've seen in a movie. I brought up Tommy Wiseau earlier, and honestly, there are some moments in this movie that feel more poorly written than The Room, and there are definite times where it was really hard for me to just hold my composure because like I understand the emotional gravitas of what they were going for, but either the acting or the writing just didn't match that intended target. With that, I will honestly say that, like, Vin Diesel and a lot of the other actors, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyrese, Ludacris, John Cena, a lot of the cast in this, like, understand the assignment that they're kind of in this just poorly written world, and are just kind of leaning into it, or at least trying to make the most of it. So the acting in this movie is kind of like it's kind of like all over the place, but again, this is stuff that you expect from a Fast and Furious film, and it actually helps with the fun blockbuster feel of this movie. And no one understands that assignment more than Jason freaking Momoa. First off, I've never seen Momoa in a role quite like this, and I really, really liked him. He absolutely stole the show for me. I will go as far as even to say that he is the best villain that this franchise has ever had. He feels like the complete polar opposite of Dom and a lot of the other villains that we've gotten in recent memory, where trying to take over the world, or trying to get revenge, or trying to be a kingpin, or whatever have you. Like, the difference between Jason Momoa and all of those villains is that Momoa is really leaning into the absurdity of the franchise, but also at the same time is just having fun with it. I don't remember the last time that we actually got to see an on-screen villain who's just actually having fun with it and making it kind of feel almost like a 40s Looney Tunes cartoon. And Momoa is really where this film really shines, and I'm really glad that he's kind of the last villain of these 2 or 3 movies that we're going to get. I think it's a really smart move connecting his character to arguably one of the better installments, if not the best sequel that we've gotten in many fans' cases with Fast X. And so for the first time in a long time, I'm actually excited to see where Fast and Furious goes and how it's going to end. Because Fast X is a super promising start for the beginning. The stunts in here are really well shot. The action is really well choreographed. And also the fact that there is stunt racing back in this, that's kind of one of the things that I do miss from the earlier years of this franchise. I'm glad that they brought it back to a small capacity. Really wish there was more, but it's really well shot regardless. All right, let's run this through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm gonna go ahead and give Fast X a 3.5 out of 5. I think this movie is really fun. It is one of the best entries we've gotten, with an exceptional villain in Jason Momoa, and has a promising start to the end of this franchise, because this is supposed to be the first of either a 2-parter or 3-parter, depending on how everything goes. But let's be honest, it'll probably be a trilogy, and I think that this is a promising start for a final trilogy and a send-off for these characters. Alright, if you guys have seen Fast X, what did you guys think about it? Are you guys going to check it out this weekend? Comment below and let me know. But let's talk about mental health in the meantime. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're talking about, talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. There's a moment in the movie where we actually meet a sibling of a dead character from a previous film. I don't want to spoil that moment because it's a spoiler for both this movie and previous installments, but there comes this point where the sibling character is confiding in another character, and kind of they're confessing about survivor's guilt. If you guys don't know what survivor's guilt is, it's basically this concept of someone that is close to a deceased individual, and that somebody questions why the deceased individual was the one that was taken or killed themselves, and they question why they're still here. From the standpoint of mental health, it's really easy to talk about suicide and survivor's guilt. I have felt survivor's guilt following the actual death of a friend who committed suicide. And it's one of those things that you constantly just find yourself questioning, what could I have said differently? What could I have done differently? Could I have made more of an effort to hang out with this individual, or text them more, call them more? It honestly plays with your own mental health and your own being as an individual, because you constantly just feel like you could have done more, you could have said more, that what you did wasn't enough, and so as a result, that you are no longer enough. And I think the film captures that in this really tender moment really well, and it just really kind of stuck with me. And so I want to just kind of encourage people that are currently going through that you are not alone. Something like Victims and Villains, abyss gazing, none of that would have been started had I not gone through my own depression or my own anxiety. But furthermore, it would never have happened, and I never would have gotten into mental health advocacy if it wasn't for losing a friend to suicide and going through that journey myself. Let me just start by saying that you are not alone, and that it does get better. You're going to question a lot of things over the next months to years, but hang on, hang with us, and seek out community, because one of the things that you'll find in community is that you are not alone. The individual that goes through that very same thing in this movie confides in community and finds actually a little bit of solace from that journey that she is kind of torturing herself with, essentially. Sometimes the terms of survivor's guilt feels also like you're going through your own trauma yourself, to where you are reliving that and alongside those questions, and that's definitely something that I went through as well. And so I just want to encourage anyone right now to either seek out therapy, counseling, talk to someone, period. And if you guys don't know where to start, mental health resource library is in our show notes below. I really hope it's an encouragement to you guys to know that you're not alone if you've ever gone through anything like either myself or this character in the film has gone through. So please stay with us and find healing. Fast X is now playing in theaters everywhere from Universal Pictures. And make sure that in the show notes below, you guys will also find links to our podcast, more movie reviews, links to our social media, Patreon, and that subscribe button as well. Hit that subscribe button. We'll be back later this weekend talking about Blackberry. We'll be back next week talking about Little Mermaid. We have some great podcasts out there as well. So hit that subscribe button and have a great weekend.